The term Shalom Bayit has come to imply that Jewish families do not experience violence in their home. Now the nonprofit Shalom Bayit works to eradicate domestic violence in the Jewish community. Joining us today is Naomi Tucker, the executive director of Shalom Bayit, and Sandra Lipkowitz, a former client. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I referred to the term Shalom Bayit as a traditional term. What was the original meaning?
Shalom Bayit means peace in the home, and it's a very beautiful concept. That means the home should be a sanctuary, a place that even when the rest of the world might feel hostile, you are safe at home. Mm-hmm. And over the years, it unfortunately came to mean that women were responsible for keeping the peace or the image of that peace at all costs. And so traditionally, if a woman came forward and told a story of being abused at home, she was told to go home and keep the peace.
I see. And so how did that then come about? How did the formation of Shalom Bayit, the nonprofit, come about?
In 1992, I was working in a battered women's shelter and realizing that we knew the statistic that domestic violence happens at the same rate in all communities, but I wasn't seeing Jewish women coming through our doors, the battered women's shelter where I was working. So I got together with a group of women to find out if we started to talk about domestic violence in the Jewish community, would women actually come forward if we did that work from within the community? And that is in fact what happened.
I see. So, you know, one of the things that I noticed in the in your website was that it's culturally sensitive. So for our audience members who are not Jewish, what does that mean?
Right. So first of all, we help everybody who comes to us, of course. Okay. But what was happening before was that because of the myth in the Jewish community that domestic violence doesn't happen here, the community wasn't talking about it. And women who were experiencing domestic violence were ashamed and afraid to come forward and feeling like they were the only one. It wasn't supposed to happen. So if it was happening to them, it must be their fault or something they did. And they were remaining silent and therefore trapped in abusive relationships. So really our goal is to break the silence within the community and to use the cultural values and messages of the Jewish community as a launching pad for talking about healthy relationships and respect and how we really should treat each other in the world.
And I understand that your programs, really, they go from kids, right? Sometimes like middle school, as young as middle school.
Yes. And
talking about relationships and being respected, especially girls being respected in relationships, all the way to training rabbis.
Right. So our mission is really about ending domestic violence. And a piece of that mission is our counseling program that helps battered women to get back on their feet, to be safe in their homes, and to help their families out of those abusive relationships. But in order to really accomplish the broader mission of actually getting at the root of the problem and ending violence against women, we need to also be doing prevention, and we need to also be changing the societal attitudes that allow domestic violence to happen in the first place. So that's why our prevention program for teens is so important. We work with about 1,000 Jewish youth a year doing healthy relationships education, as you said, starting in middle school all the way through college. We work with their parents and their educators so that really we build into their education this life skill about looking towards healthy friendships and healthy relationships in their future. And at the same time, we are also working with community leaders and clergy because they're the people that are really the moral compass of the community and also the people that someone in crisis will turn to. And we want to make sure that everyone in the community knows how to respond when a battered woman does reach out for help.
And speaking of a person in crisis, Sandra, you were one of those women.
Yes, yes.
And we would really like to hear your story.
I had dated my ex-husband for almost 4 years, a pillar in the Jewish community, very well respected. And we got married. I thought he was the love of my life. And on our honeymoon, he started talking differently to me. And I just didn't know what happened. And we came home, and then life just changed. I mean, he was critical, he was mean, he was cruel. He was financially restricted. He had me stop working. I had no money.
And you've never seen any signs of this, ever?
Never, never. It was truly a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde story. And, I just didn't know what I had done, and I was trying to figure it out. I didn't come from families like that. In my life, spouses did whatever they could to make their partner happy. And it was just, I didn't know. And that I was out to lunch with a friend who had been on the board of Shalom Bayit. And she said, I think you need to read these books, and I think you need to call somebody. And I called, and they sent me some information, and I went down this checklist, and I was shocked. I could check off almost every sign on the list. And this doesn't happen to me, you know.
Right,
a well-educated woman, I had a very good profession, you know, this doesn't happen. And I spoke to the counselor, and I really realized I was in deep and I needed a lot of help. And thanks to Shalom Bayit, I was able to get out of what could have been, because he had not been physical with me. He had only been psychological, financial, and emotionally abusive. But before I moved out, there was one incident of physical, and I'm sure that that would have escalated had I stayed longer.
And this is pretty common. Do you see this kind of example, I guess, in your work?
Yeah, it's a very common pattern of abuse, and we're so grateful and lucky that Sandra called us and got out when she did. 1 in 4 women in their adult lifetime will be in an abusive relationship, and I've been doing this for 30 years, and I still find that statistic completely alarming, that 1/4 of all adult women in the world will be in an abusive relationship at some point in her lifetime.
Amazing. So before we run out of time, we only have about a minute left. We want to make sure that we get to the fundraiser on the May 6th, the 23rd anniversary celebration. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, thank you. Our Creating Hope celebration is going to feature Jackson Katz, who's a world-renowned violence prevention educator that in particular works with men on how to be allies in violence prevention. And the event's going to raise money for programs to support women like Sandra, and all of our programs for battered women, our youth programs to prevent dating violence, and just to really transform our community to one that doesn't tolerate abuse.
Terrific. Naomi, Sandra, thank you so much
Thank
for being
you,
here.
Lisa.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
For more information about Shalom Bayit and their 23rd anniversary celebration on May 6th, log on to shalom-bayit.org. Up next, it's April, and that means it's time for California Wine's Down to Earth, a celebration of sustainable wine growing and winemaking. We'll talk about the upcoming events and meet a couple woolly weed eaters when Bay Area People returns. Stay with us.